All right. So this segment, we're going to learn about something related to business. A lot of times at work, people just bullshit that they know what everybody's talking about, myself included. And so today's topic is EBITDA, which I think most people don't understand what it means, but somehow are like, I think that means margin. So we have brought George Wells. George Wells created the Wells Group. I started working with George, I don't know how many years ago, George?
3
years ago, almost 4 years ago. We brought George in because the CFO of Barstool Sports had left, and we needed a pro. And we were staring down the Penn acquisition. And how was that experience for you?
I would say it was one of the most life-defining stints of my career.
Oh, that's
actually.
awesome.
Yeah.
It was really fun. Terrible, but fun.
It was exciting. It was exhilarating. It was sort of like an episode of Succession.
Yep.
And I live for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was also so important that we had, just to set some context, so we kind of ran things kind of loose at Barstool. And then Penn showed up and we were like scratch on the record, like everything has to be recorded. Everything has to be documented. We had the Sarbanes-Oxley thing. When remember I made the joke about that and they didn't like that very much. But you were such a godsend. You were so helpful. And then when I came to Food 52, I was like, who's going to be my first call? It's going to be George.
No, it's great. I think what's so exciting about the Penn transaction is, and it actually dovetails into the definition of EBITDA.
Great.
Is when I first started working on Wall Street 20 years ago, there's this joke amongst the finance bro set that is like EBITDA, EBITDA, EBITDA. Even when people get drunk, this is sort of like what they chant because it's the biggest proxy for a company's success. And at Penn, in the Barstool of it all, they were obsessed with our EBITDA, as you know. And so as we traverse the year, media landscape changing, political witch hunts in the newspaper affecting our revenue and bottom line, we really pushed to hit the EBITDA numbers like crazy.
Hard. Yep.
Hard. And then on Wall Street, it's sort of like, it sounds like a fake metric because as someone that studied accounting in undergrad, you think about net income. But the benefits of EBITDA versus net income are almost obvious when I explain the definition of EBITDA. So EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Net income is just your net income. And so interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization are deducted from your gross earnings to derive your net income.
So EBITDA is the company makes money, right? And then you have payroll costs, and then you have marketing spend, and then you have COGS, which is cost of goods sold, which maybe we'll do in a different episode. Then you do the EBITDA, like all the money that goes out the door. It goes to the government, it goes to lenders, people who you owe money to. The money sucks out the door, and what you are left with is how much money is in your bank account.
Well, yes, of course. But the
you
nuance.
Don't have to say yes because I don't actually know what I'm talking
no,
about.
I think you do. But the difference is interest. One company versus another can have the same revenue, marketing spend, costs, blah, blah, blah. But if one has debt and one does not, then the interest for the one with debt will lower its net income.
Sure, that makes sense. Okay, so it really tells you the health of a company, and in part because the interest is a very big variable. Who owes money and who doesn't?
Yeah, who owes money and who doesn't. And that really affects how an investor would treat one company versus another. So they want to neutralize the metric. Another is taxes. One business may have like a lot of net operating losses that they're carrying forward because they bought a company that had lost money and now they can deduct that company's past losses against their income today. So you can also optimize your tax payout.
By virtue of how much loss you have.
By virtue of how much loss you have, or if you're in Florida, you probably have lower tax.
One state for another.
Exactly.
Okay, so you're an investor. or you're Wall Street, and you're like, hey, I'm looking at company A versus company B. And let's pretend the two companies are exactly the same sector, same product, same revenue, same COGS, same payroll. One's in Florida and one's in New York. And the one in Florida doesn't owe any money to anybody, and the New York one does. Florida company looking really good. And when the analyst or the investor rates the company or judges the company, they're like, ding, 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 it's more attractive.
Exactly. Or they want to say you can always re-domicile or move a company, right? So they don't want to give a company in Florida more credit than they deserve.
Oh, interesting. So they're like, hey, you look pretty good, Florida company, but if you moved to New York, you wouldn't actually be as good as the New York company because they got the New York tax thing.
Exactly. Same with depreciation and amortization, the last two letters of that famous acronym. One company could have a more accelerated depreciation of its office building that it bought, and another company could have a more conservative. So there's financial engineering and changes that a company may take for its depreciation and amortization. And you don't want to judge a company's overall attractiveness off something that can be so easily.
And sorry, when you're managing as a CFO depreciation, I'm assuming this goes through the audit. Gets audited. This is where like all the good Price Waterhouse people of the world make $1 bajillion, where it's a methodology you're using for depreciation, and that can change from one CFO or CEO to the next. But you got to make sure you do it in a clean way and in a way that passes an audit. Is that right?
Well, very good question.
Thank you, George.
EBITDA is non-GAAP, so it's not on your audited financials. It's not something that has to undergo an audit. However, depreciation and amortization is a line item that one can see to calculate your EBITDA, but it's not subject to audit.
Okay, we're going to hold GAAP for the next, we're going to hold that thought. What about amortization? What's amortization mean?
Amortization is oftentimes the amortization of goodwill or amortization of an intangible asset like IP. It's non-cash. So both depreciation and amortization are typically for cash you spent in a previous period, which is why it's neutralized. And so one company may have a ton of intangibles that it's amortizing on its books, and then another company may not, and it doesn't really reflect the overall health.
And that's why you want to take it out.
And that's why you want to add it back. So you basically take your net income. To get to EBITDA, you can take your net income, add back interest, add back taxes, add back depreciation and amortization, and that's your EBITDA. So it's like you can calculate it either way, but I think the way to think about it is you're excluding it from your cost so that you can compare one company to another.
Okay, so I'm a little confused, and I'm sure people listening to this are as well. The purpose of EBITDA is to be able to create a consistent metric between companies.
Correct.
Either for the street or for Wall Street, or either for the street or for an investor.
Yep.
And it looks at earnings, so how much money you make, so that's net income, right? Mm-hmm. How much money you make before interest,
taxes,
depreciation, and amortization. Yep. So company makes money, then you subtract taxes.
No. So company makes money, and then you subtract everything except for interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
You add those back in. You get a little like...
Yeah, you just say, not those costs, take those out. You know what I mean? Because that can be more engineered.
Okay, George, this was a great discussion. So I'm just going to say it one more time for people in the cheap seats, including myself. So EBITDA is a way for investors or the street to evaluate a company. It looks at your earnings and it looks at your earnings. It looks at your net income, and then it says taxes, interest, amortization, and depreciation are kind of variable, and they should not be discounted unfairly for one company versus the other company. So you add those back in, and then you have your bottom line.
Right, then you have this universal metric.
You have a universal metric because amortization, depreciation, earnings, and taxes are somewhat variable, but they don't actually indicate anything having to do with how the company is performing.
Exactly.
Now work.